Thanks so much. So yeah, as was mentioned, we're going to have about 35-40 minutes to have a discussion around some of the most exciting opportunities with the combined technology of 5G and edge computing. And I imagine we might touch upon use cases from across manufacturing, transport, gaming, and more. And we'll try and have a think and an answer to the question of how operators should capture this opportunity now and then also into the future. So I'm joined by a great panel of guests, and the first thing that we will do, I think, is just ask each of the panelists to go through and very quickly introduce themselves and their experience and role with 5G and edge computing. So that's the first order of the day, and perhaps we could do it in the same order as is on the slides, just to make things simple. So I guess that means starting with you yourself, Terje.
Yes, thanks, Tilly, and thanks for inviting me to the session. I hope that you can hear me. So I'm Terje Jensen. I'm heading up the global network architect team in Telenor. So we are more than 60 people in that team in the different Telenor units. And I'm also heading up the 5G Readiness strategic program in Telenor, which is not only looking into technology, but also on the market and the commercial side, as well as product and financial aspects of 5G. So Telenor, we are basically a mobile operator, but an operator both covering fixed and mobile in 9 different countries, Europe and Asia. We have more than 189 million customers in these countries. And on the status, as you asked, Tilly, we have commercially launched 5G in 5 of these countries. So there you can actually go in the shop and buy a 5G offering from Telenor. These are basically starting from mobile broadband and fixed wireless access, but we also have actually commercial contracts within the edge and also on the B2B side, basically then on private networks. We're also using edge in some of these cases. So that's where we are on the edge and 5G, as I said, in commercially in five different countries. And then, yes, on top of that, of course, we are also running quite a few pilots with customers, and I'm sure we're coming back to those later in the session.
Absolutely. Thanks, Terje. Massimo, can you go next?
Yes, good morning, everybody. It's also a pleasure for me to be part of this panel. I'm Massimo Valla. I'm Area Manager, Digital Environment Ecosystem in Team Innovation Department. The Team Innovation Department works closely with the R&D Research Center and vendors and partners and standardization body to evolve the connectivity and provide infrastructure and innovative platforms for new services. In particular, we have been involved in the standardization of 5G since the beginning, and since 2-3 years ago, we started in trialing 5G application and services and platform to support these new services in Italy. We had the opportunity to use 5G frequencies before they were commercial, thanks to a tender from the Ministry of Economic Development. So we have been able to set up a few 5G districts in Italy and work closely with partners, with several partners there to test the use cases with the 5G frequencies, and not just the 5G network, but also the edge computing infrastructure. Recently, TIM, which is of course a leading operator in Italy and in Brazil, has launched Nuvol as a cloud provider. So we really think that by combining the new network, the 5G network plus cloud services, thanks to the Nuvol operation, we could really provide the infrastructure necessary for the deployment of these kind of services.
Thanks, Massimo. That's great. Juan Carlos, over to you.
Okay, well, my name is Juan Carlos Garcia. I'm Senior Vice President of Technology Innovation and Ecosystems at Telefonica Group. As you know, Telefonica is a company operating in 12 different markets with more than 350 million customers worldwide, mainly in Europe and Latin America, with specialized business units on cloud, cybersecurity, IoT, and big data. I've been working in Telefonica for more than 30 years in different positions around engineering and technology, and I'm now in charge of coordinating the Technology Innovation Plan and managing the representation of Telefonica in different standard bodies and industry associations. As part of this role, I'm a member of the GSMA Technology Group and lead the GSMA Telco Edge Cloud Initiative. I'm also a member of the board of Telecom Infra Project and chairman of 5Tonic, our co-creation lab for 5G innovation. And I'm right now pushing in the Telefonica Group projects like edge computing or network slicing, collaborating with partners in Europe and rest of the world.
Thank you, Juan Carlos. And last but not least, Franco, would you be able to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good morning to everyone. My name is Franco Messori, and I'm the Chief Product Strategic Officer within Infovista. I'm working in this industry since over 40 years, so I've seen all the evolution from the electromechanical to the 5G, network slicing, and cloudification of telecom. Starting my career is what now is called Telecom Italia or TIM. Fundamentally, Infovista is a leader company in the planning area, so to plan the radio coverage as well as the calling, in testing, in all the virtualization of OSS or virtualization of the SOC and NOC, and in what we call the experience assurance. Just recently, ITU has just standardized one of our new inventions about the SQR as a new algorithm to test voice and video. And it's going to be standardized at the end of this month as a ITU P565.1, and so we are a very innovative company. We have moved to cloud all the different fundamentally services that we offer, from the planning to the testing, as well as I said, everything around the virtual SOC and virtual NOC activity. We have different R&D places around the world, from Europe, France, Italy, and the UK, and India, and Japan, Malaysia, and US.
Great, thank you so much. And thanks everyone for taking the time to join the panel. Looking forward to this. So, I mean, I think the first thing to try and tackle or discuss together is just around how 5G and Edge really come together and where they're similar and complement each other, and perhaps also where they're different or offer different opportunities. So one way of thinking about this is to ask, to what extent 5G has been a catalyst for edge computing, or to what extent is edge computing kind of an important enabler of 5G? And maybe the first thing would be, perhaps Massimo, you'd be happy to just give a brief outline of where you see these technologies being complementary and coming together, and perhaps where they're separate or different for you guys at Telecom Italia.
Okay, sure. So for sure, 5G and edge computing are complementary technologies that can be both contributed to the deployment of low latency and mission critical services. That's first of all because 5G provides the lowest latency currently possible on the radio connectivity, and also provides improved security and ultra bandwidth, according also from the deployment that you already seen. You really have a performance gain in that area. However, 5G alone is not enough. For example, if the application is not deployed on the edge, which means nearest to the devices in the closest cloud data center, the performance gain in terms of latency remains limited for some use cases. And this is the reason why application developer and cloud providers and telco operators should work together and guarantee that the best low latency architecture for critical application is offered, and the application is always deployed nearest to the user. This deployment of application should be transparent to the developer. The developer should work in such a way it doesn't see any difference in deploying an application in the classical cloud or deploying this application in the cloud edge. And that's why TIM is also working on not just on the infrastructure, but also on the process for developers to deploy their application to this cloud edge infrastructure. However, edge computing is not just connected to 5G. A good example is when we talk about the smart home, for example. In the smart home, you have sensors, you have actuators, all connected to an edge computing device that is able to control the local environment, preserving privacy. In that case, the privacy is a very important part, and the connection to the cloud is only needed when, for example, you have to work with natural language processing, even though there are also examples where natural language processing, for example, for a smart assistant, is done even locally to the home. So that's an example of edge working without 5G. So definitely they are both complementary, and we think that application really need these complementary technologies to deploy the best performances for special critical application in terms of low latency.
Great, thanks, Massimo. And it would be good, Franco, perhaps to get your perspective on this as well, in terms of, you know, where for you guys at Infovista 5G sits in comparison to Edge, and how they're similar and different for you.
Yeah, but definitely I'm reconnect what Massimo was saying. I mean, the 5G is an enabler fundamentally of many type of opportunity. Edge computing exists even without 5G, but together with 5G enable even more opportunity. So fundamentally, and I bet exactly the point of Massimo, when you want to see the ecosystem between 5G and Edge and understand what you can do, you have to have a complete end-to-end vision fundamentally of the two things. Application, device. It's very important. And the network is, of course, in the middle, or the, let me say, the clouds are in the middle. They may be one, maybe more than one. So at this point, the ecosystem becomes even more complex. So what we do is, in Infovista, we try to create this end-to-end vision, because at the end of the day, to understand the value and to understand what type of new business you can develop top of this new ecosystem, that of course is a fluid ecosystem. It's something that is not fixed, because the edge can be different even hour by hour, even minute by minute, and the way in which the 5G works, because the network slicing, when the network slicing will be implemented, because it's not something that's going to be exist on day zero. We know that very well, because it's still a challenge fundamentally, but that it's a dynamic environment. So create an end-to-end vision to understand what type of real service, what type of latency, what types of quality, what type of performance the customer perceive. Because at the end of the day, we have to look from the customer point of view, is the challenge. That is what Infovista tried to help. We try to create this end-to-end vision through all the different components, looking not only the network, the 5G network, but also combining together the 5G network performance and quality with the what we call the user plane, the real content that fundamentally is transferred between the device and the application, score this and create the real end user vision, depending by the application. Some applications are interactive, human by human, some are the human to machine, other machine to machine, of course. Score has to be different, and fundamentally the way in which we use our technology is different because of the application. So that's fundamentally is what we do.
That's useful. And I mean, Franco mentioned, you know, looking at this from the customer perspective, and maybe it's helpful to ground this in some real examples of what's going on and what a customer might be experiencing. I don't know, Terje, you mentioned at the beginning that you might be able to share some stuff around what Telenor is doing practically with 5G and Edge, and that would be great to hear about. Do you have an example or two that you could share where maybe these two technologies are coming together and you're exploring the impacts of that on a potential customer?
Yeah, I can probably walk through a couple of cases if you allow me, Tilly. So I was just just a starting point. I think I fully agree with the two previous speakers on that they are basically complementary, and that is the 5G and Edge, and we have defined what we call in Telenor a two-track approach to 5G, where one of the tracks is that we actually see that 5G is an evolution of 4G. So it's more capacity, higher speed, and lower latency, and those kind of things. So, and that has by itself rather little to do with edge. And what we have launched, and most of the operators have launched so far, is mobile broadband and fixed wireless access on 5G. Again, maybe that too much to do with edge. But on the second track, and that's where I think some of the comments so far is also interesting, that we're looking into the new cases there. And then we can walk through a couple of cases what we have been working on Telenor. So maybe starting with the health sector, and then we could say, and I think an important point is that you need to sit down with the customer and get into the dialogue on what is the problem that the needs they want to be solved. So we actually, and I can share a bit on experience with two companies in the same country, both in the health sector. So the first one is just on I'm thinking one of the example I think Massimo also alluded to is that the request there was actually an autonomic network. Let's call it a private network, on-campus network. So that was a new hospital to be built, and everything should be stored on the campus. So it should also be a full 4G, 5G coverage for the hospital. Where of course the connectivity then should be also locally, in the sense that the full mobile network, kind of a private network if you want, on the campus. But on top of that, they also wanted to have applications which they are for running the hospital, which then will be like, for example, sharing patients' records on the campus, making sure that they have all the calling systems and everything working independently of the public services. So that's kind of I would say that the primary driver there for the case is autonomy. And maybe not that much latency, maybe not that much capacity, but of course it's also autonomy, and then the cloud environment locally on the campus to support the other applications in a way. Then there was another case also in the health sector, same country, where they actually wanted to have what they call a digital patient. So the purpose there was actually to avoid that the patient need to go to the hospital. So you could actually monitor the patients wherever they are, at the home, in the car, shopping, or whatever. And to be very open with you, actually 5G was not really needed. You could just as well do 4G, but you needed to have local storage of the patient's records. So again, the confidentiality, or call it privacy, and that part of it was important to keep within controlled area. So that was more like I would call it an edge cloud, where of course 5G provided a bit of faster capacity, or more capacity, a bit faster and so on, but not really needed in the first use case. And the first use case was basically to monitor and keep track of the heart rates of the patients. And then, of course, to run analytics on the recorded information from each of the patients to trigger alarms, so any abnormality which the medical doctors need to intervene. So that was more like, I would say, call it a edge cloud case, while the other one was probably just on the autonomy case. And then we have quite a few other use cases. Exactly, the 5G and edge needs to come together, which is typically covering high definition cameras, which needs to continuously record what's going on. It needs to be on-site processing on that, triggering actions, giving advice to the operators, is remotely controlling devices and those kind of things. Where exactly, I think Massimo touched on, that's where exactly you see the advantages of 5G with the short latency and capacity, and the local storage and local control, which is edge, coming together, which is then facilitating these kind of things. So that's some of the cases we have been working on, and of course there are a number of more cases which are also building on 5G, building on edge, and with some of these components and with different drivers. But I think the essence of what we have been learning is that we need to sit down with customers and talking through, what are they asking for, what do they need today, and how do we see this develop going forward.
No, that's useful, and I think sometimes when you talk about edge computing, it's always latency that's kind of highlighted. And I guess what you've mentioned and shown there is that there are other drivers for moving out to the edge, which can include this data sovereignty, data security angle, which I think for, particularly on-premise edge is very well addressed. And that's worth kind of bearing in mind when discussing and thinking about customer use cases. And perhaps, Juan Carlos, it would be good to hear from you, because some of what's been described here in terms of customer use cases, if you as the operator want to perhaps address the opportunity more so than just providing a vanilla connectivity offering. You may need to work with and engage with new and different parties and different parts of the ecosystem to what's been done historically. And I guess in particular, I'm thinking the developer community is potentially a key stakeholder in thinking about edge computing and the opportunity area. And so what do you see, what do you see as kind of key in terms of who you will need to work with, the key partners, and the ways that you will be able to kind of build a successful ecosystem to help support edge computing and 5G?
Okay, that is a good point, Tilly. So the 5G business development, as you say, is not just a question of use cases, but also of business models and partnership agreements. No? And there are a few that can be applied, and we can go through them. No? On one side, we have the relationship model with the B2B customers, where operators should deliver in an easier and more convenient way services, traditional services like the 5G private networks, no? Either fully dedicated and on-premise or partially dedicated and supported on the public network, as Terje illustrated with his example. No? In both cases, operators can leverage the skills, experiences, and processes and tools they have for the public network, offering the B2B customers a better experience, no, in terms of agility and flexibility. Okay, and in this case, I think it's important to partner with IT specialists that can help you in improving your interface to customers and take the benefits of the introduction of these new cloud-native technologies like the 5G standalone. No? That brings the possibility of delivering this flexibility and agility. On the other hand, also you mentioned there are many applications of 5G in many verticals, but in general, all of them require a deep knowledge of the business they apply to, and thus require operators to partner with business specialists in the different sectors. And this is also something that we will see, we are seeing now, and we will see much more in the following months and years to happen, no? Operators partnering with specialists in the different sectors. In our case, we have already partnership with many, and you can see that on our webpage in all sectors, no? In health, in industry, in warehouses, logistics. So in each of them, I think the key element is go with the best ones that know already the customer, know the problems of the customer, and can help you to optimize your portfolio. And finally, on 5G, there is of course a question of the killer 5G application, but it's not so much a question of a killer 5G application. We think that the question is more the killer 5G platform to help others to develop these applications on top of your capabilities. And here the operator needs to evolve the network to a platform over which the third parties can develop these services using the telco network and computing capabilities. No? And this means an extensive application of the B2B2X paradigm, and that is partnering with solution providers, as you mentioned, to facilitate them the use of the telco capacity. So in summary, we need a new relationship model with B2B that is more agile. We need partnership models for the new 5G B2B services, and we need a platform model to exploit the network and computing capabilities in B2B2X models, okay, both for consumer and business segments.
Great, that's really useful. Just a reminder to people, if you want to submit your own questions for the panel, if you've got areas you think I'm missing, do that in the Q&A box, and I can check it and put them to others as we go. But perhaps, Massimo, it would be good to get your perspective on this. So any examples of where Telecom Italia is perhaps partnering or working with new or different parties to maybe what you've done before, or where you're delivering use cases, using 5G and edge, and I guess any learnings from doing that you wanted to share with the audience and with the other panelists?
Sure. One example would be 5G Automotive Association. So there is an association of partners working together to bring the benefit of 5G to the automotive industry. We have been involved in this association since a few months, and we learn a lot, basically, working together. You work with the car manufacturer, you work with the, of course, other telco operator, and you build up use cases together and scenarios where you challenge basically the technology. In this specific example, we set up trials in Italy, but also in other countries together with the other partners, where you have many vehicles on the road connected to a platform where all the data is collected, for example, for applications related to road safety. For example, to anticipate or avoid dangerous situation, in particular when vulnerable users are on the road, are involved. Imagine an older pedestrian or a wheelchair or scooters in mixed areas where both cars and light vehicles are using the road. In this case, the edge computing infrastructure is fundamental because you want to have the lowest latency possible. Again, I think it was already stressed that you have to work together with application providers and application frameworks providers, so that the application process, the deployment of the application from the developer point of view is really simplified. We have been we have a partnership with hyperscalers and cloud providers to test the first examples of bringing the same developer experience that they find in the classical clouds to an edge cloud infrastructure. So the process to deploy this application should be no different for these kind of developers. Otherwise, developers will not be attracted by developing application that must be tailored just for the specific edge use case. They want to write application, and transparently the application should run also in the edge infrastructure, optimized to select the closest data center to enhance the performances. I just can mention very quickly 3 other examples of application where we have been working on together with our partners. One is extended reality, and in that case, the application was to render a 3D scenario in the cloud. So basically we offload from the device to the cloud, to the edge cloud, the rendering of the 3D scene, and this is then streamed to the device. This can be applied, for example, to entertainment or retail and augmented education. In this case, the economical advantage is that you can use for this application even low-end devices like headset, and because you move the computation to the edge cloud. And of course, since they have to be reactive, you want to have the lowest latency possible. Another example is smart agriculture, where we have the position of the machinery computed in the cloud to calculate together with prescription maps to calculate in real time when to distribute fertilizers, for example, on the crops. And also you can have drones that can flow, for example, over vineyards and use hyperspectral cameras data and process this data in the edge. And finally, in the area of 5G manufacturing, partners and potential customers we have been working with, they don't just want to remove the wires from the manufacturing site, but they want also to visualize the controllers, the PLC. Because of course you gain all the flexibility when you move this software, this control software in the cloud. You gain all the flexibility we have seen in general in the virtualization of application in the ICT sector. So that's why we have worked together with them to have some first experiment of PLC virtualization in the case of Industry 4.0 and 5G manufacturing. So these are just examples where we have work together with the potential customer to understand their needs and to adapt the architecture to these needs, basically.
Great, thanks. And Franco, just from your perspective, I mean, working with these new types of partners to build a new ecosystem, it comes with some practical complexities, maybe even around things like if you have a low latency application, who is actually responsible for delivering that overall low latency for the customer? How does that responsibility split if we have an operator maybe a hyperscale cloud provider, an application or solution provider, and they all have elements that maybe contribute to that latency. And could you give a sense of, how maybe you expect some of those complexities to be handled, and how you expect, a successful partnership model to be built for 5G and Edge?
This is a great question, and I tell you that. Let me just tell you what our direct experience is during this day. This scenario that you are designing is absolutely a realistic one, and we will see many situations in which we have competitors that have to work together, and in a real competition type of situation, as well as we have, as somebody said before, the business model has to change. The business model for service providers to change, probably, in my opinion, in the next 5 years, is going to be totally different than today. And they can either become the orchestrator of the ecosystem, so they take the responsibility end to end, or they play fundamentally a role within an ecosystem where somebody else will be responsible. But back to your question, that's exactly the #1 problem that we already face. I want to share one experience that we are having without sharing the name, but it's one of the largest projects in the world that they got a very large contract for the automotive industry, very, very large. This is probably the largest one. And fundamentally, the problem now they are facing is that the SLA that they fixed with the customer very often is not respected. And fundamentally, there is a typical ping pong of responsibility between the telematics unit manufacturer, the carrier that is serving on the mobile side, the application vendor, and so on. And the problem that today, the current tools that are deploying in the networks, either 5G network, 4G, it doesn't matter, or on the edge side, or on the hyperscaler side, these tools are silos, are separate. Each one take a picture of a specific segment of the problem. And what is missing here is to have a complete picture end-to-end between all the different segments. And one of the roles that we are playing, particularly for this customer, but like for all the customers, it's exactly to provide this glue between these different type of picture that are taken on the different segmentation level, and provide an end-to-end view that means a real vision of where the bottleneck or the point responsibility are. And of course, the company that takes responsibility to drive it, to orchestrate the ecosystem, is the company that to deliver the SLA to the end user. But at least he has complete visibility, and then he can pinpoint and he can create a different type of relationship with the time of contract with the segment fundamentally provider of the specific part of the communication of the application. That is the #1 point. For that reason, I'm pretty sure that all the friends that are here in this conference call, they know that their business model is changing, it's going to change even more, and there's a bigger decision to take. Are you going to become the ecosystem orchestrator of everything? At this point, they need to collect all this information and combine together in end-to-end, or they are one of the segment providers, and somebody else will take the responsibility.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful. So we had a question from an audience member, and maybe Juan Carlos, you could step in on this one first. It was asking about operators, POPs, sites, and the site strategy, I guess, for edge computing and 5G. And I think in particular, they were interested in, I think, the kind of the most extreme low latency use cases where you perhaps have closed loop automation going on, and kind of control of automated systems taking place at some sort of edge site. I'm not sure whether you think that that's sort of best served for an enterprise edge, but it would be good to understand, the Telefonica perspective of your site strategy with edge computing, how you are thinking about where you will have points of presence for different types of edge computing potential use cases.
Yeah, well, so as you said, there are some use cases that will require very strong low latency, very strict low latency, but they are not the majority. So probably a high amount of use cases, maybe 80 or 90% of the use cases, can do with things around 10, 20 milliseconds and this can be done with some tens of nodes in a market. Okay, and precisely these are probably the same amount of nodes that a telecom operator needs for the core network. Network functions. So I think this fits probably this first step in the edge computing deployment. Somehow is complemented by the deployment of the 5G core standalone architecture. Okay, and that can already serve, I would say, the vast majority of cases. There is, of course, a second category of use cases that require much more strict latency, as you say, probably those requiring control of machinery that requires high precision and real time. And this can be done in two ways. So in the short term, of course, is with solutions that are on-premise or deployed in a campus very close to the customer, or in a second phase using a far edge, okay, a location that is very closer to the customer but not on-premise. And this is something that operators will need also for the radio access network functions. Okay, so it will be the kind of nodes that we will need also for our real-time requirements for processing the baseband signal of the base stations. Okay, and this means that the deployment strategy may have synergies as well with the renewal of the network technology towards these cloud-native 5G standalone architectures, and also towards the virtualization of the radio access network and the fixed access network.
So you do see that the potential for, I guess, physical sites that will combine Telefonica's virtualized network functions with third-party enterprise applications, and they may run at the same physical site. Is your perspective in terms of how your site strategy will play out?
Yes. So in general, I think telecom operators will be an important tenant in the edge computing nodes. So we will be one of the consumers of that computing capacity. It makes sense to have synergies on that edge computing solution and have in the same nodes at the same time coexisting network functions, so telco applications and business applications. Okay. In fact, you will need part of these network functions in any edge node. So you need a breakout solution there, functions, and somehow you will have to deploy some network functions in the business edge nodes anyhow. Great.
So we are out of time for this panel. There were some other questions that hopefully the panelists may be able to answer by typing or offline after the call. But for us now, I think we need to wrap up. So just for me to say thank you so much to all of the panelists for answering my questions and taking the time today, and hope that you enjoy the rest of the content to come.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Excellent. It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.